Welcome, everybody, to the Friar Talk podcast. I am your host, Matt. We have Chase and Isaac who are on every day, but we also have a guest in Ethan. Ethan, do you want to say hi to everyone?
What's going on? I'm excited to talk with you guys tonight.
So, Ethan here is a Mets fan, and so we decided it'd probably be a smart episode to just talk about the NL in general and to talk about who's the best team in here, who has the best chance to make it to the World Series out of the NL, and just to go over a few teams. Also, this is our very first YouTube video, so if you're listening on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like the video if you like it, and comment anything that you feel is necessary. But with all that said, let's get into the topic today. So, who is the best team in the NL? I think there are four teams that are truly competing for this title, I guess. Obviously, the Dodgers, they're coming off of a World Series win. They just signed your guy, Ethan. And now they have some competition with the Padres. Of course, they have the Mets. And the only other team I think that really gives them a challenge is the Braves. But I'll start with you, Ethan. You get to start off because you're a guest today. Who's the best team in the NL? Do you think the Mets did enough to cement them in that spot, or what else do you think they need to do?
Well, first off, Matt, I think you started out by going with the team of I think that is going to win the National League, the LA Dodgers. I think that by adding Bauer, they already have such a strong rotation to begin with, the lineup. So they're first. I think they're the best team in the National League. Um, to answer your second question, I think with the Mets, I think you know as a Mets fan, you get so used to the idea of having an offseason that's not very successful. I remember the big signing when I was, first becoming a Mets fan was, we added Jason Bay or we added Johan Santana. Obviously, Santana worked out better than Jason Bay did. This offseason, we obviously had a superstar, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Carrasco. Even the addition of James McCann and catching is, in my opinion, a big upgrade from Wilson Ramos. And so I think that obviously we seemed that we were really close in on the Bauer sweepstakes. So you obviously maybe I personally would have loved to see that go our way, but it didn't. But I think that when you do take a step back, the Mets really did have a good offseason in comparison, especially when you look at how tough the NL East is. I think they definitely have projected themselves to be either the leader of the NL East or at least amongst the top two. Um, I think, though, a good way to end the offseason would definitely be to maybe extend Conforto, especially Michael Conforto, before the season starts, and then obviously to get Lindor locked in, not going to the season, maybe with him like questionable whether he's going to stay or go, would be a really great way to end the offseason.
Before we started recording, you brought up Chris Bryant. Do you think that's someone that's obtainable for the Mets?
I do. I would be sad to see. I obviously get sensitive with the Mets, so I would hate to see. I think JD Davis is the big trade point that they would maybe lose to get somebody like Chris Bryant. But I think that when you look at the overall lineup, and if the Mets are truly going to win now, Steve Cohen came out and said in his initial press conference he wants to win a World Series within 3 years. Then you got to go make that move, and I think that he would be somebody that would not only add great defense to our infield, but obviously another great bat to go along with the already great Conforto, Alonso, McNeil. It would be awesome, I think.
Yeah, that'd give you guys a real nice group up there. But Chase, what do you think about the Mets? Do you think that they made some good moves? Do you think that they still need to make any moves, or what are your thoughts on just their team as a whole?
Yeah, I think they're a really solid team. I love their rotation. DeGrom, Syndergaard. Syndergaard's hurt, but he's coming back, right? Then you guys have Carrasco and a couple other guys. I mean, that's a solid four right there that can win you guys playoff games. I mean, when you guys have Carrasco and Syndergaard as your top three, that compares to most teams like the Padres, the Dodgers, and maybe the Rays for like top three rotations in baseball.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we had an episode earlier this offseason where we were talking about rotations, and I think we said that it was between the Padres, Mets, and Dodgers. Obviously, this was before Bauer was added, so that changes things quite a bit. But I mean, all those three teams are very, no, I don't want to say top heavy, but they have just really good arms, and their first three guys are just spectacular. Um, and for the Mets, I think they were kind of in the same boat as the Padres, where their guys, their rotation was like rated a lot better, but there were some depth questions, and there was a lot of guys that weren't quite as proven if injuries did come to fruition. But I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Mets rotation as well. Isaac, what about you, man? What do you think about the Mets?
The Dodgers, Mets, and the Padres are no specific order, but they're easily the best three rotations in baseball. On offense, they added Lindor. They already have Pete Alonso, so they definitely have a solid lineup. I've already pretty much come to the conclusion, a prediction that we're going to be playing the Mets in the NL Wild Card Series, because I do think the Dodgers are the best team in baseball, and so the winner of that would definitely have to face the Dodgers. But definitely top three rotations right there that I just said. They have a good lineup too. Lindor is a superstar. When you add that kind of caliber to your team, there's so much you can do with it.
Yeah, so Ethan, I have a question. I was just thinking about this right now, it popped in my head. But the big guy that I think of that's a Met is David Wright. Do you think there's a chance that Lindor becomes that level of a superstar in New York?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of people on the team right now that have that feeling that Wright definitely, gave off and the captain type vibes. I think right now, if you were to ask me that question, who is it in current day? I think it's tough to argue against Pete Alonso. Obviously, we drafted him. He came up and has come through the farm system and is now our starting first baseman. So that's the connection. I think that is very much what would make him closest to Wright. But I think if you give Lindor, especially if he resigns, he definitely brings that excitement and that energy level up. I definitely could see him being in that captain type role, especially with what I've seen from what he did at Cleveland and the team leader that he was there.
And it seemed like it was always really odd in Cleveland too, because it seemed like they were almost shopping him for like, I want to say it was like 3 years, where it's like, oh yeah, they might trade Lindor. It's like, and they held on to him for so long too. But I think that he's found his home. You brought up that you want him to get extended. I feel like you got to do it after you trade for a guy like that. We see that in a lot of trades, especially in basketball, where a guy gets traded immediately the next day signs. Baseball is a little bit different. Baseball offseason is always a little bit slower. Um, but I definitely see him as a guy that's going to be in a Mets jersey a long time. And of course, Pete Alonso. In a way, it's a little bit similar to what the Padres kind of did with their forward, but you guys traded for Lindor. But then you have that homegrown talent in Alonso. So I like the moves that they've made. I definitely think that I would take them over the Braves right now. The Braves are also a team that has a great core as well. I think I want to say the Braves are a little bit younger than the Mets just overall, but the Mets are, I was talking about this earlier. It's terrible that there wasn't the playoff seeding wasn't changed, because either the Mets or the Braves and either the Dodgers or the Padres are going to make the playoffs as a wild card. And so that's really unfortunate for those teams, because if for instance, if the Padres make it and then they have to pitch or they have to play against either Syndergaard or DeGrom, that's not what you want at all in a one game series. So I think that any of these teams can really make a run. I think the Dodgers are the only team I think they're the team that's very obviously the best right now. And I don't know what you, Chase and Isaac, think about that, but I think that the Dodgers are still a little bit ahead of the Mets. And I think they're still a little bit ahead of the Padres as well. But Chase, what do you think about the Dodgers going into next year?
The only thing that they're really missing is a third baseman, and even then, Edwin Rios is no slouch. He can hold down third. He's a left-handed power bat. Can't argue with the rotation. Maybe their bullpen's lacking a little bit, but they re-signed Shrinen, so their only real weakness right now is third base and the fact that they're over the luxury cap.
And Ethan, you said that they were your pick for the NL, right?
As you know, it's so funny. I love that you guys are so confident in my Mets. It's rare for me because as a Mets fan, it's almost like we never feel safe. I always say going into a season, you got to get to 93, 95 wins any way you can do it. And I love the optimism. Thank you. I need to start listening to you guys more. But yes, I do think the Dodgers are the favorite. I just don't know how you can really see it any other way. I want to be biased. I want to say it's the Mets. Maybe, we get a month, 2 months into the season, and this conversation could be very different. But I just think that when you look at the Dodgers with the offensive power, the starting rotation, I mean, we were talking about it before we got into it. Now they have Bauer, so it's Bauer, Bueller, Kershaw, and then we were saying we all enjoy Dustin May, Phil Gonsolin. Remember, he even started 2 wild World Series games for them. Julio Urias. This is a great rotation and a great lineup, and they just seem like they're easily going to win over 100 games.
Yeah, and last year, I mean, the rotation is disgusting. Kershaw, Bauer, Bueller. They still have David Price. They have Dustin May. I mean, Dustin May might not even make it into the rotation. And I actually did see his first ever MLB start. The dude's nasty. His two-seam fastball is, we were talking about it before, how he got Machado on it, but he gets everyone on that pitch. It's so disgusting. And so if you have that guy like potentially coming out of the bullpen, it doesn't really get better than that as far as MLB rotations go. But Isaac, what do you think about the Dodgers, man? Do you think they're still the top dog?
Yeah, first off, I just want to say, Ethan, you're lucky to have wanted 90 to 95 wins, because as Padre fans, I used to be happy with 75, maybe 70. But the Dodgers are still probably the best team in baseball, although I don't think the Padres are that far behind, especially in 2022. And I know I'm looking kind of far ahead, but when we get Clevenger back, I definitely think we're right there. But, to me, it all depends on if they get Justin Turner back. Justin Turner's been their perennial third hitter for a while. He always brings in a lot of runs. He's always batting over 300. Justin Turner is a foundational piece for them who brings a lot of consistency. And Chase, you're right. Rios isn't bad, but in terms of what they bring to the lineup, Justin Turner is much better, in my opinion. But other than that, re-signing or signing Bauer is huge for them, huge for their rotation. Because now you got Bauer, Bueller, and Kershaw as your top 3, and then you're able to throw May or Gonsolin, and they're easily the best team right now until 2022 when we get Clevenger back. Then we're right there.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, like, just being the best on paper doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna win. I mean, we've seen that in baseball so many times. We've seen that with the Dodgers specifically so many times, where they're like, oh yeah, they're by far the best roster, and then they get knocked out in the playoffs. I mean, that's kind of what the Dodgers were known for up until last season. But nobody brought up Kenley Jansen. Very interesting to me, because at least when he's played against the Padres, he has struggled a lot.
Oh yeah.
And that's a spot where if they don't add another elite arm and he is their guy, I could potentially see them getting knocked out of the playoffs because he struggles in a game and it's, completely pivots the series. We saw that almost happened in the Rays series where they had that crazy walk-off. That's not really on him. But for a second there, when that happened, it looked like, oh, the Dodgers are going to lose this one. They're going to do the same thing that they always do. They're going to blow the series. I still think that's probably their biggest weakness. I know you brought up Justin Turner. I've also heard from one of my buddies who's a Dodgers fan, Justin Turner is like not in good condition right now as far as like he can't walk well. And he was saying like he's not nearly the same guy that he was a couple years ago just because of all the injuries. He's like just hasn't been healthy. So I do think that is maybe the reason they haven't signed him yet. But he's definitely one of the guys that, like, when you look at like how great the Dodgers team has been the past few years, he's one of the guys that's always in the middle of it. Him and Bellinger, a couple other guys, Max Muncy, but those guys, like, we've seen them just have so many clutch moments, so many big moments. And so them losing a guy like Turner would definitely be a big deal. But, they got Mookie Betts. They got Cody Bellinger. They're not short on talent there. They did lose Jock and Kike, but those are more depth pieces than anything. And now they're going to have guys like Gavin Lutz hopefully take on a larger role. So I do think that they're still probably the deepest organization in the sport, which is really big, especially if we don't know how COVID is going to affect the season this coming up year. But it was big last year to have a lot of depth because, especially like, for instance, for the Padres, they went to that playoff series and they had no starting pitching. The Dodgers will never find themselves in a scenario like that because it's like, oh yeah, they have like 8 guys they could pull at any time, which now it looks like the Padres are in the same boat there. But having such a deep team, you gotta say that they're the best team on paper in my mind, and I think that we're all kind of on board there. But the Mets, I think, are close, even though, Ethan, you're a little bit more pessimistic on us than we are on them, which is funny, but I get what you're saying. I mean, before last year, I think I was pretty pessimistic because it was just like, oh, yeah, sure, the Padres are going to make a big jump this season. Like, okay, like, we've heard this one before. And then last year, you saw them make a lot of big jumps, and now this offseason, they've made a ton of moves. And last year during the trade deadline. But how do the Padres then? I'll go with you, Ethan, because we haven't talked to you in a second here. How do the Padres compare against the New York Mets and the Los Angeles Dodgers?
I think that, like we said, we're looking at things on paper, and when you talk about those three, I think they all do match up against each other. The Padres have a huge offseason. They signed Snell, they signed Darvish, Joe Musgrove from Pittsburgh. They re-signed Jurickson Profar, Cronenworth's coming back, Machado, Tatis. This whole lineup, this whole bench, this is the advantage that I could see them having, is they like to have fun. I recently wrote an article about this. I watched a regular season game last year against the Dodgers, and there was a play where Max Muncy threw the ball to home plate and the throw was offline, and they tied the game. I don't know if you were watching it, Matt. I don't know if you remember that moment. But you just saw the reaction from the dugout. Everybody was involved, and that's why I thought this team has the most fun in baseball. They have so much youth. It's a palpable feeling of excitement. You were just talking about Isaac, 75 wins a couple years ago. You were excited to get from them. Here they are looking to get 95 to 100 wins. Tatis is on the cover of the show. It's just an exciting time to be a part of the Fire Faithful. You can't ignore it. And obviously, even if this year doesn't go as well as they hope, which, what would be a disappointment? They don't make the postseason. I think they're almost guaranteed to win 88 to 95 games. Next year, like you said, you got Clevenger coming back. It's an exciting time to be a Padres fan. And I definitely think that they're going to rival the Dodgers and the Mets.
So, Isaac, I'll go with you right now. And since we talk about the Padres so much, just about their roster and stuff, I want to ask you, how do you compare them on all levels to both the Mets and the Dodgers?
I think like lineup for lineup, they might be the best. It's really hard to say because Betts is the second best player in baseball, and he makes that much of a difference. When you got guys like Betts, Bellinger, Seager, Muncy, who knows if Turner's back, that's huge for the Dodgers. That's a really solid lineup right there. But, that's not going to undermine what we got. We got Tatis. I think he's the most electric, most exciting player in baseball. I think there's no debate about that. And you can make a debate for Acuna or Juan Soto, but I don't think there's a debate. Fernando's on the cover, he's the most electric player in baseball. But Machado batted over 300. Machado and Tatis were both third and fourth in MVP voting. Cronenworth got snubbed for Rookie of the Year. I know he's 26, but hey, he's still a rookie. But he had an amazing season. Trent Grisham, like Chase and I were talking about it yesterday. He's really on and off, but when he's on, you guys remember he hit 3 home runs in that one game. But I'm not a big Tommy fan. Will Myers, he should have won Comeback Player of the Year. Our lineup stacks up with anyone in the leagues. I think that's very easy. And then you have the addition of what's his name? Ha-seong Kim? Okay. He's a good hitter too. And then there's Hosmer. But our lineup competes with anyone's. In terms of pitching, like I said, us three have the top rotations in baseball. I think there's also no debate about that one. But those three teams to me are the best teams in the NL right now. And then there's the Braves, who are also very good.
Also, you didn't even bring up Trent Grisham's Gold Glove last year after basically being traded away for a single error. That's what it was. I know they said, I think it was the Brewers GM came out and said, like, we're not trading him because of the error he had. But everyone was like, yeah, no, you're trading him because of that error. Like, don't lie to everyone. But he won a Gold Glove, and he's definitely made improvements there. I know he did bobble a ball in the outfield very similarly to the one last year, and it was like, oh no, dude, come on, you can't be doing this. You can't be missing these ground balls into the outfield.
Yeah, that was
but
a little crazy.
Chase, what's your answer to that question I just asked about how the Padres compare to both the Mets and the Dodgers?
Okay, so I think the Dodgers have probably the best depth on rotation than the Padres just because of their pitching prospects, because of Weathers, because of Gore, and because of Mortejon. It's going to be exciting to see if the Padres do implement a six-man rotation to get all three of them experience, or see if Weathers or Mortejon come out of the bullpen and bolster it. I just think that the Padres have a little bit better of a lineup than the Mets, but I don't think anybody can outtake the Dodgers just because of Betts and Bellinger. Can arguably be top 5 outfielders in the league, if not top 3, with Mike Trout being the first, obviously. Yeah, I'm excited to see what the Mets do this year. I've always been a big believer of, like, you know what, the Mets can win the East almost every single year. I always say don't sleep on the Mets because of their rotation. They've just been missing the offense, and now they have it, so they're a complete team now.
Okay, so I got to ask you a quick question, Isaac. Joey Fuego is the Mets' 5th starter, and I know you're not the biggest fan of him, but do you think that's okay for them? Do you think they can roll with him as their 5th guy?
Yeah, they'll probably go 3 or 4 wins and then a guaranteed loss.
Ethan, do you like Joey Lucchesi?
I have to be honest. I don't know too much about him. I need to look into him. I know that there was a pocket of Mets fans and Mets Twitter that were excited that he was coming to New York. There were some memes about him. I don't know if we mentioned it too. I want to remind you guys, Marcus Stroman's coming back too. He accepted the qualifying offer. He's coming back on a 1-year, $18.9 million deal, and I think that he was the first one that really seemed to kick off the idea of, like, the Steve Cohen excitement is palpable. He came out and said, directly on Twitter, and said, oh, we're so excited about Stroman, or I'm so excited about Steve Cohen being the new owner. No, but I think, from what Isaac said, I think that if that's our 5th starter, I'm more than happy with that.
Yeah. Just so you know, his go-to pitch is a fastball high, and he hangs a lot of them. That was the issue that I always had with him. Is all right, how successful can you really become if your pitches are all high? Like, every single pitch he throws is up in the plate, which is so odd to me that he didn't develop something lower on the plate, but it's just kind of his style. He definitely had a lot of flashes in San Diego. I mean, at one point he was a number 2 starter for 2 years.
Yeah.
So he was a guy that was not a super highly graded prospect, but always okay. I think if he's your 5th guy, it's all right. But maybe that maybe emerge that role away from him. But having him as a number 5 isn't a problem by any means. Now, when the Padres had him as their number 2, that was a complete different story, because you don't want your number 2 pitcher posting a 5 ERA consistently. But besides these 3 teams, I'll let you go first, Ethan. Is there any team that you think that we need to mention in the NL pennant race, I guess?
Well, I think it's impossible to not talk about the Braves. They were obviously 1 win away from the World Series last year. I think, again, you guys are so hot on the Mets, and I am too as a fan, but I think the Braves might be the favorite to win the NL East. You look at that lineup. Freddie Freeman's coming back, MVP, Dansby Swanson. Their rotation right now reminds me a lot of the early rotation with DeGrom, Syndergaard, Harvey, Matz, when it was really exciting to have that youth going in New York. You have, Mike Soroka, Ian Anderson, Max Fried. That's a stellar starting rotation. I think just, and then they re-signed Marcell Ozuna. They're bringing back the pieces that make them work. Travis d'Arnaud, I wish we didn't let him go, but here he is now crushing us in our own division. I think that this team is very capable. As a Mets fan, whenever they go to Atlanta, I never feel safe with a lead. I never feel safe in that stadium. They get the chop going, very intimidating. And I think that we need to talk about the Braves because they obviously have the pieces to compete again this year. And I think you could definitely see them facing the Dodgers in a rematch of the pennant.
Isaac, you brought up Acuna earlier today, that he's maybe the one guy that you could put up there and the exciting, as the most exciting player in baseball. When you talk about Fernando Tatis, that's the other guy that you got to bring up. But Freddie Freeman, maybe the most underrated guy in the sport. He just consistently has been good throughout his whole career. He's always a player up there. He should always be in the MVP race. I mean, he did win it last year, which rightfully so. I think we all agreed, Chase and Isaac, I think we all agreed that he should have been the guy that won it. And of course, we wanted to see Machado win it, but like it made more sense that he would win that. But I remember seeing it was a graphic basically talking about like how much teams are paying their players, and they pay their lineup like so little compared to everyone else. And I know that Acuna's locked up for a long time, and his contract isn't very big, so they have this their full on core. Azuna was signed earlier this week or last week. Like it was only a few days ago, and so he's back. You have Acuna, you have Ozzy, you got Freeman, you got so many young players. I definitely think that they have to be brought up, and I wouldn't be surprised either if they end up beating out the Mets and end up winning that division, just because I think they're a little bit more lineup oriented, I guess, where the Mets are relying on a couple of guys in DeGrom and Syndergaard to really not carry that rotation, because they have other guys too, but to really dominate. And if one of those guys was to go down, I think that we could definitely see the Braves winning it, and then the Mets as a wild card team there. But I like the Braves a lot. Chase, anything you want to bring up about that team?
No, you guys pretty much said all of that. Though the one team I did want to bring up is the Nationals. You know, they did win a World Series 2 years ago. They've kept the rotation the same. The bullpen might not be as strong, but all their key pieces are still there. They had an off year last year, but they're not going to do as bad as they did last year. They're probably be contenders for the second or third spot, even that possible second wild card spot. So, and they still have probably a top 5 rotation in the league with Scherzer, Strasburg, and I think it's Patrick Corbin, right?
Yeah.
So all the NL teams that we've been talking about have only been in the West and East. The NL Central is kind of the weak division in the National League, so it's really going to be interesting to see how the West and East play out and who gets the wild cards and who makes it in the playoffs.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and when you look at the Nationals, they might not have as solid of a lineup as a lot of the other teams, but when you have Scherzer and Strasburg as your 1 and 2, that's pretty good. Also, Juan Soto, I just do this because I'm always interested to see like how people know baseball players. If you talk to someone that's not a diehard baseball fan, almost every time they don't know who Juan Soto is, and that is just crazy. It's not like marketed as much as some of these other guys, because Juan Soto is 100% one of the emerging superstars in the league, just like Fernando Tatis, just like Acuna, just like guys like those two, and he does not get like the national attention that he deserves. But I like that you bring up the Nationals. Isaac, what about the NL Central? Because Chase, you briefly brought him up. Is there any team that you think or who do you think is going to win the NL Central?
I think the Cardinals are going to win it. I don't really like the NL Central. I think it's pretty weak. I think whoever makes it's bound to get bounced in the first round. But Ethan, was it you that brought up the Brewers earlier? I don't really know too much about the Brewers. Can you tell me about them? Because I want to know, like, why are they so high?
I think the big piece that they added this offseason that is getting a little bit of traction for them is Keston Hiura. They added him. He'll be a good infielder for them. I think they'll have him probably at second base. Besides that, they have Devin Williams returning, Cy Young winner, which is pretty great out of the bullpen. He had a great 2020. Obviously, Yelich, he had a pretty down year. I think we all saw that. But like you said, I think it was you, Chase. You said you believe in Yelich. You're definitely going to not give up on him. I think it's hard to not look at the Central, though, and not go right to the Cardinals. Obviously, they add Arenado, huge pickup for them. They re-signed Wainwright, re-signed Molina. I think we all knew that was going to happen. I think it's pretty hard to make an argument against the Cardinals winning the Central. Also,
the Cardinals are just one of those teams that they remind me of like the Spurs, where it's just like, they're going to be in the playoffs every year, where it's like, oh yeah, the Spurs were in for like 18 years or something like that. The Cardinals are always in it. They're always in the mix. And if they don't make the playoffs, they're only a couple games out of it. But I do agree, like any of those teams, the Brewers and Cardinals specifically, they're just not on the same level as those other 4 teams that we mentioned. And I would guess that they're probably going to play the winner of the NL East, just because I feel like the Dodgers will end up being the team with the best record in the National League. So in a matchup with the Braves or the Mets, I definitely don't like either the Brewers or the Cardinals. But I mean, if you make the playoffs, you have a chance. So you got to bring up at least a couple teams there. But Ethan, how about we kind of wrap up this episode with just going through and giving our top 5 in the NL? And I can let you go first. I know you might not have it off the top of your head, but if you want to quickly think about it real quick here.
Let me think about it for a second. I think 1, 2, you got to go LA, San Diego. And then I got to throw my Mets in there at number 3. You guys have inspired me to feel more optimistic. We did get Lindor, so you're right.
Yeah.
And then I think we go back to Atlanta. Has got to be 4. And then who would be 5?
Just so you know, I'd have the same 1 through 4 as you.
Okay. I think a team that you could make two arguments. I think that it's going to be from the NL East is going to be the 5th team. So like we were talking about, I think it's either going to be the Nats or maybe you could say the Phillies. I think if the starting pitching was there, I think you could make an argument it's the Giants, maybe. I think I'll go Cardinals just because they do seem like they are the best from the Central. So Dodgers, Padres, Mets, Braves, Cardinals.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to pick a team that's probably going to even be in the playoffs, where the other ones are like, all right, this is like the 3rd team looking in a division, so that's pretty tough. But Chase, what's your top 5?
I have the same 1 through 4. My 5th, I'm gonna choose the Nationals or the Brewers. That could go either way for them. I don't believe in the Cardinals that much. I know they got Goldie. I know they got Arenado. It's just I have a hard time believing that the Cardinals are going to win it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And their rotation isn't quite as strong, especially as the Nationals. So I would actually go Nationals at 5, just because we saw them make a run and just be really dominant. And if you have Scherzer and Strasburg just balling at the same time, it's tough to lose those 2 games if you have those guys really dialed in. So I'm going to go Nationals at 5, and then the same 1 through 4 as well. But Isaac, you're the last one on this list. You're the last one to say your list. Who do you have?
Pretty much the same thing. Dodgers, Padres are easily 1 and 2. I'll go Braves over the Mets. And then I'll go Mets at 4. And then it's really hard to pick between the Nationals and the Cardinals because the Nationals do have Scherzer, Corbin, and Strasburg. But the Cardinals did just pick up Nolan Arenado for a bag of chips. So I'll go Nationals because they show that their pitching, they won a World Series, and they have probably the best hitter in baseball. So, yeah, I'll go Nationals at 5.
Yeah, I like it. No, it's definitely going to be very interesting to see how the NL plays out because there's a lot of really good teams. And then there's also a lot of really bad teams now because baseball's almost becoming a little bit NBA-ish where there's like half the teams are trying to win, half the teams are like, all right, we're trying to tank. We're not trying to be good. We're trying to lose as many games as possible. We saw that with the Cubs this offseason, selling you Darvish for nothing. That was still crazy to me. I still can't believe that. But anything else that you guys want to add before we take off here?
I got nothing.
Don't overlook the San Francisco Giants. I wish they weren't in the NL West.
They're always so scrappy. It's so annoying.
I was thinking about
if they make a wild card spot, it's dangerous. They take off when they wild cards.
No, I was thinking it's kind of odd that like we're talking about the National League and we hadn't even mentioned the Giants one time up until like a couple minutes ago. Like if you would have done that, 10 years ago, I'd be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
They went 3 and 5 years?
Yeah, or 3 and 5 or 6. So I don't know what it is, but it's not even annoying because I don't like the Giants. Like I have nothing against the Giants. It's just that whenever we play them, it's like, oh, we're gonna destroy them, and then Yastrzemski goes yard or something, and then it's a tie game. We're like, weren't we supposed to destroy them? Like, what happened? So they're always
Oh no,
really
last year at the beginning of the season when the Padres started off super hot and they played the Giants, and I want to say they lost like 3 out of 4. I had this Giants fan texting me like, "Bro, Manny Machado is so overrated. Like you guys are a fluke." Like all this stuff. I was like, oh, okay, great. Like I'm like, yeah, I know, man. Like I've heard this, but luckily that was not the case last year. But I mean, that's pretty much it for us, I think, here. Ethan, I want to say thanks again for coming on, man. Hopefully, your Mets are an exciting team this year. I definitely think they will be. I think you got Lindor, who's just a sweet piece. I mean, he's been rumored to the Padres for like 3 years now. I don't know what the plan was with that rumor. Like, you're gonna put him in the outfield. I think that's what it was. Wasn't it like, oh, we're gonna move him to center field?
Tatis in the outfield. No, Tatis to center.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah,
it
good thing
was.
that never happened. Not exactly a fit there. But I want to thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. This was fun, just kind of talking about the NL. I think it's going to play out. It's going to be really interesting. I think and of course, there's going to be one team here that like we didn't even bring up. That's just going to be like, oh wow, this team's really good. They got a bunch of young players. So that's what makes sports fun. That's what makes baseball really exciting. But I'm looking forward to it. We're about 2 months out, a little less than 2 months from opening day. So it'll
1
be
week
fun.
from spring training. Spring training starts next week, or pitchers report next week.
Yeah, so now we'll start getting some content out there. And also for this YouTube channel, we're going to be posting about the Padres' top prospects here pretty soon. And this was just kind of our first video to get out on YouTube. But if you liked it, hit subscribe, press the like button, leave a comment, all that. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, subscribe as well. Also for Apple, if you rate and review, that's a huge help. But thanks again, Ethan, for coming on. And I will be talking to you, Chase, and Isaac will be talking to you guys soon. But thanks again, and we will be back probably next week.